Hi, my name is Bethany, and today I want to talk to you about how I felt when I first found out that I was autistic. Now, I was actually diagnosed late at age 23, which was actually just about a year ago. Like many late diagnosed autistics, I had to advocate for my own care and diagnosis. I had lived a lot of my life knowing that there was something wrong with me. I felt like I was a normal person, but somehow I was like kind of broken, and any day I would just somehow snap out of it or grow up out of it, but that just didn't happen. So I had both the luxury and disadvantage of being fairly self-aware. The reason I am sharing this today is not just to relate to other people who have been late diagnosed, but also those who are late informed of their diagnosis. A lot of parents opted to not tell their children that they were autistic because they didn't want them to live by a label. Now, some of these people knew, like me, that there was something wrong and they were searching for the answer, but there are also people who were blissfully ignorant and not very self-aware that maybe some of the things they were doing might be kind of off-putting or strange. I believe that though our experiences are not the same, there are some similarities that might be helpful for the autistic and for their loved ones. Though I had been searching for a reason for my brokenness, autism was actually suggested to me by someone else. I've mentioned before on this channel the stigma around autism and my own ignorance concerning it. In fact, I was so far removed from the idea that I could possibly be autistic that I completely brushed that idea off. Someone had actually ended up hugging me and saying, "It's okay, I'm autistic too." And I was like, what are you talking about? You know, nicely, I just awkwardly smiled and then walked away thinking but I'm not autistic, but okay. It was suggested to me as Asperger's, of course, that form that's one step away from that scary word autism. And I'd actually dabbled in the thought of Asperger's before when those times came out of desperation and I was Googling online, what is wrong with me? I had seen Asperger's pop up before, but I was always like, that is certainly not me. But now that someone was suggesting that I might just ever so slightly have Asperger's, I was willing to go ahead and take another look. At that point, I think I was just ready to find the answers to why I felt the way I did and why I experienced the world the way I did, and stop kind of shoving it underneath my bed hoping that it would go away. At this point, Asperger's had already been absorbed into autism spectrum disorder because of the DSM-5. However, this information for some reason is really slow to leak to informative articles and such not online, so I got a lot of strange conflicting answers when it came specifically to the differences between Asperger's and autism. However, to my dismay, I was seeing myself in Asperger's and specifically in autism in females. This slow sinking feeling came about where I realized that this was the answer, and it was written in my language. But that meant that I was weird. That meant that I would never be normal. That the person I imagined myself to become someday wasn't who I would be, and it wasn't a matter of just waking up tomorrow and finally being what I thought I would be in my head. People probably didn't like talking to me. Maybe they just talked to me out of charity. Though things fit and I finally found some peace in knowing why I experienced the world the way I did and the struggles that I experienced, it was like the entire world readjusted. It was like everything I had ever known was different, and especially people were different. I think that it was just that understanding where I had constantly convinced myself that I really knew the true people, their true selves or whatever. I thought oh, of course no one could actually do these bad things. No one actually had bad intentions. Everyone was just so wonderful, and I somehow knew them even though I would hear these things come back in confidence that didn't line up with the image I had in my head of people, and I would reject that because I couldn't accept it. And then I started to realize I really don't know these people, and I really have been really gullible and naive concerning people and my relationships and understanding the world, and it was terrifying. It was like everything I had convinced myself I knew was wrong, and it was like I had convinced myself so that I could cope with being here, and suddenly it was taken away, and then I started to wonder, how do people perceive me? Am I like the weirdo that they don't really want to deal with or talk to? Am I such a freak? No one's told me, and they're all secretly just pitying me and they don't want to deal with me. And it was just this horrifying thing at the same time of being an answer. So while I tell you guys a lot about the awesome part of getting those answers and finally feeling understood, there definitely was a time where honestly I kind of started getting angry. Not only did I feel like I lost my sense of connection with people, not only, you know, it was a fake sense of connection, to be completely honest, but I had convinced myself of things so that I would feel better about it. And it was like everyone was so different, and it really was that people thought differently than I did, and that concept is still difficult for me to grasp, that people don't think the way I do, and they do have the intentions that have been shown by their actions. And it was just really hard to accept the dark side of people exists too, just like I'm sure it exists for me, but it was just something I couldn't accept from people. And then I was angry, like, why didn't anybody tell me? Why didn't anybody tell me that I was a weirdo? Why didn't anybody tell me, like, this is why no one wanted to be my friend? Why didn't anybody tell me that I was such a weirdo and such a freak? And then I mourned the loss of who I imagined that I'd be. I thought that I would someday grow into this person who gracefully maneuvered about all the social situations and knew what to do and knew what to say, and that it would just come with time and I would just click and be someone else. And for some reason I always thought myself like I'd be a good businesswoman, even though I'm really not suited to that kind of thing. And I don't know, I just had this image of someone who would somehow be so great and confident and good with people, and that's just not who I am. And I look weird and I do weird stuff, and it doesn't just age out like I thought it might. So that sucked. I also realized a few things about people also that I didn't think before. For example, with a lot of stimming, I legitimately thought that people did those things. I thought they spun around in circles and did things with their hands and all sorts of things, and just pretended they didn't or hid it in public because they were being more reserved than me. And I thought they were just being uncomfortable around me and didn't want to show anybody that. And then I found out that people don't do that. They're not just hiding it. The reason I haven't seen them do it is because they don't do that. So that was fun. And on this channel I've also talked a little bit about my mental health issues, and this realization definitely affected those sorts of things in both positive and negative ways, and kind of like in waves. It was definitely like the example of delayed processing in autistics. It was a lot of things to process. It was almost like my entire identity was revealed to me, but at the same time was not what I had perceived myself as. Of course, something unique to those who are late diagnosed instead of just late informed is that time period where you start to realize, like, this is who I am and this is the whys to all of the questions in the back of my mind, but you can't share that information. I've lamented about this particular issue plenty on this channel already, so we'll skip beyond that point. After my diagnosis, I felt a little out of sorts. But I had learned a lot about autism, especially in my search for answers and to understand more about me and to understand if this was me in the first place. And I had begun to be able to say the word autism without feeling like I had just said a bad word in public or something. I feel like I was starting to drop my feeling of stigma toward it. I learned that a lot of the beautiful and wonderful things about myself that I hid were worth letting out. This is not an easy process. I think it's actually more difficult for those who are late informed, especially who are not self-aware in, looking for those answers, because there's no personal drive in the person to understand what's going on with them, and for everything to suddenly change is difficult, and it's less welcome when you're not already aware that something isn't quite right. I know that it's hard to believe, but the feeling that the entire world has just changed is simply only your perception of the world that has just changed. The people who love you loved you and saw your awkwardness, and they saw your weird things. They already knew all of that about you, and they still loved you. You are just as wonderful and worth being here as the day before you knew. I know a lot of people still see autism as a disadvantage, and it's okay for you to feel that way. However, I feel like the idea that we are so disadvantaged that the whole thing is just terrible and horrible is kind of misguided. I think that everyone experiences disadvantages and advantages in their life, and while yes, we experience things that a lot of other people don't, we also are capable of a lot of things that other people aren't. Whether you choose to live your life seeing those as bad things or good things is up to you, but you can be upset with who you are, or you can embrace who you are, and I can almost guarantee you most people who are late diagnosed or late informed have probably worked on hiding very special things about themselves in their life because they knew it stood out, it made them different, and it kind of scared them. And if you learn to let those things out, those are special things about you, even if they're weird or awkward to other people, that are unique to you, and it's important to be able to be the person that you were made to be. Autism is not a death sentence. It does not mean that you are less or stupid or worthless or any of those sorts of things. For me, finding out about autism helped me understand who I am and really start to really understand my identity as a person. I could choose to live the rest of my life hating that I have disadvantages that other people don't, or I can just accept the fact that this is who I am, this is how I work, and embrace that and be okay with it. And for me, I've actually become quite a lot more comfortable with who I am, despite looking and seeing the differences a little more than I used to. But I can also share information with people and hopefully help other people discover who they are a little more and hopefully be okay with that. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Are you a late informed or late diagnosed autistic, or have you known about your autism all of your like childhood, teenage years, etc.? Also, I want to mention something I keep forgetting. I do have a Patreon, so if you're interested in that, I will link it in the description below, and it'll also be on my end screen. But just a quick shout out also to my current patrons. Like, you guys are super amazing. Can't believe how awesome you are. Thank you so much for supporting me and being part of my journey, and thank you guys just as viewers for being here. It really means a lot to me. Also, side note, if you hate my hair, I'm sorry. I'm really here for it right now. The beanie has made a comeback, but also with a wig, and I feel like this is just my best life. Anyway, I hope that you're having a wonderful week. I hope that this video helped you in some way, at least a little bit, and see me in my next video. Bye!